Hello, Bearhawk fans. Here on River Bear today, we're going to talk a little bit about floors. So again, I'm not an expert at this. I'm learning like all the rest of you are. First aircraft build ever. In fact, last night I went to our local Experimental Aircraft Association's chapter and met some of the people there. And I had been to their meetings before, but this is the first time I had gone after receiving my kit. So, but more on that later on. Hopefully I can take you all with me to some of the meetings there. But I decided that during my spare time between work and life today at River Oaks that I would work a little bit on the flooring system. Now, a lot of people say this is the easy stuff, and it is, but that doesn't mean it doesn't take a little bit of planning and a little bit of care. So what I want to talk to you about is what kind of planning did I use, and how did I do it, and what did I choose? And maybe if you're new and you're looking at some of these videos as they speed by, you'll say, okay, well that makes sense, and that's where I get these items. Now I will tell you that almost everything I have came from one of the online retailers that you all know starts with an A, ends with an N. So I was able to buy most of the things that I needed for my floor assembly from them. These won't be included if you buy the recommended kit that Bearhawk will point you to. In my case, it was Wix Aircraft. But these particular pieces that you'll need for the floor assembly, you're gonna have to buy from someplace else. So what do you get from Bearhawk? Well, when Bearhawk sends it, you're gonna get some of these pre-cut out floor panels. And in this case, this is one of them. This is the piece that goes in front of the seats. It'll be the one that I do next, and I have to put in the fuel select selector valve piece in first. And there's a piece of hardware that's this piece here that I have to put in first, and then this will all go in here and it'll all match up. So that'll be the next thing I start working on. But doing the part of the flooring that was right after the rudder pedals made sense to do it, kind of to work the bugs out, and it really isn't going to affect anything else that I do right now. So you will get this, like I said, from Bearhawk. It'll be pre-cut, pre-formed, pretty much the shape that you need, 0.032 aluminum. It'll come filmed on both sides. You have to peel that off, obviously. If you take the EAA sheet metal class, you'll learn a lot about these different materials, and I recommend that class. I did take it. I took the live version. I actually went down to Norfolk, Virginia to take it, and I do recommend that course. Again, nobody's sponsoring me, so this is a free plug for EAA. I really learned a lot about sheet metal and how to rivet and do those sorts of things that I didn't know how to do, because I just didn't know how to do it. And some of the things that are my big fears, believe it or not, are sheet metal and fabric, because I've never done either of those things. As you'll learn more about me, the electronics part is probably the least of my fears, because that's what I do as I work in the electronics industry. So I'm not so worried about the aircraft wiring as I am about some of the things like this. And I really do want the aircraft to look nice. So it'll come this way. Once you install it, you'll have to remove the film. You'll have to take off this printing which goes through the film onto the sheet metal itself. I used alcohol to do that I picked up from a local paint supply store. But what I did is I laid this out in there, and I actually marked and screwed the holes through the film, and then removed the film and then installed it. That was my sequence. It's a sequence that worked for me. Hopefully it'll work for you as well. Maybe if you want to, you can comment down below and say why or why not that was not a good way of doing things. The other thing is, there's lots of different ways you can mount the floor to the fuselage. Reading on the blogs and reading from Bearhawk themselves, seemed like speed nuts were a good way to go. So these are U-shaped speed nuts. These are actually commonly used on cars. So if you look in your car, you'll probably find these if you haven't seen these before. They're here. Here's a close-up of it again. It's a U-shaped, and basically it'll slip right over the tab that is there. So you'll have the tab, and you'll mark and drill it, and then these things will slip right on, and they have a lot of give and a lot of play in them. So this is a fast way to do it, and it produces a fairly good result. The other thing I decided is I wanted it to be black hardware. And the reason I want it to be black hardware, as I'll show you in a minute, is that I want to coat this floor with the same thing they use on truck beds. And the reason is that this is meant to be a bush plane, and what I don't want to do is spend a lot of time carpet washing or cleaning the carpet, or getting upset if somebody gets in out of the dirt and gets into my aircraft. So I'd rather just be able to clean it up easily, vacuum it out. If a little water gets in there or something gets spilled, it's not the end of the world. So I decided that I would go with black, so I wanted black screws and black washers. And the reason I chose those was, again, it would all match when I painted the aluminum flooring with the truck bed lining. It would all match up. So here, I purchased off of the web a stainless steel truss head screw, and I bought some stainless steel washers to fit those, and they're all black. And I think one of the things you're finding out about me already is that I do like washers. I do like there to be a washer, but I utilize these for actually screwing it together. But one thing I did notice on the web is that a lot of people talked about using ones that had points on it, machine screws that had pointed tips. I chose these flat-headed truss screws, and the reason I chose the flat-headed truss screws is I didn't want any sharp objects protruding out underneath the floor here. I'd rather have something that was a blunted finish. And once this is all together, really, and you have your holes, and these are on your tabs, these screw right into here like this. And if you don't get it cross screwed here, and it gives you a really nice assembly here. So the other thing you have to choose in all this, or decide, is what size screw you want to use. A lot of people are using smaller ones. So I wanted something a little bit bigger in terms of the fastener. So I went a little bit of a different direction than a lot of people did on the web. So I went with 8-32 by 5/8 truss head screws. And again, available for you, off of the web, easily purchased. And then I went with, again, stainless steel washers, and they come in a pack of 100, fairly cheap. And then I went with these speed nuts, U-shaped speed nuts, the size to fit that. And I went with Hillman. Again, Hillman's not paying me or anything to mention them, but I've seen Hillman used a lot on cars, and I've bought them in the past for cars. So I thought this was a good solution, and these are made in Taiwan. And I do like to purchase from reputable companies and that manufacture in reputable locations, and so I could be fairly assured of the quality of the Hillman part. So what else will you need in order to do this job? Well, you're going to need a permanent marking pin, obviously, but beyond that permanent marking pin, you're going to need the appropriate metal screw in this. The appropriate metal drill bit. And in this case, I'm just using a standard drill bit, not using an aircraft one. I do have aircraft screw bits, but for this is just fine. It works great. I needed a set of Cleco pliers, available from one of the aviation supply places. These are fairly handy. You should have these in the toolkit anyway. And then this little Cleco clamp, quick clamp. You learn about these at the sheet metal class, but really the way these work is you drill the hole, you put the Cleco clamp into the Cleco pliers, you squeeze the Cleco pliers, and this little metal bit comes out and protrudes, stick it in the hole, and then when you release, it pulls back and then basically makes a temporary rivet-like connection for you that you can also then later on come back and just remove it by pushing down, pulling out, and taking it out of the floor. The reason I did this is that while I was positioning the floor, I wanted to make sure that it moved around so that all my holes would be where I wanted them to be when I was all done. So what I did is I drilled, marked, and Cleco clamped, and then went on to the next hole. The other thing you'll need is a set of these speed clamps. These are available from a lot of different big box stores, excuse me, as well as online. And then I also used this in different locations, which is a handy dandy vice grip style clamp. This one is an Amazon Basics brand. It works just fine. Just put a little protection on the end of this, which I did. I used a piece of cloth rag to protect the metal surface. But that's to hold everything in position so that things don't shift around. Because one of the things that you are going to learn right away on this is that you don't want things moving around while you're working on them. It's just a bad thing. Now, The other thing you're gonna need, and I'll reach back here into my toolbox, and this is something I've been using a lot, is a set of calipers. Now this is a digital caliper in this case. It measures in metric and also measures in SAE. It zeros, and you can do both, an opening of a hole, or you can do the width of a hole. So I use this a lot, and I use this to make sure that I'm squaring things up the best I can so that the aircraft comes out looking professional and decently done. So I've been using this a lot, and these aren't very expensive, and you can get them from all over the place, but better than a measuring tape, better than a yardstick so far. I've been using this probably on everything that I've been doing here so far, either to measure a bolt to make sure that I'm getting the right one, measuring an opening, measuring where the panel is going to sit. I've been using these all the time. So I highly recommend that you get yourself, a decent, not terribly expensive, but one that's accurate set of calipers so that you can measure things, and the digital ones are really nice. I also have measuring tapes like probably most of you have. In this case, this is a Milwaukee. I use these a lot during the construction of the house here on River Oaks, but in this case, I don't use it that much here. It's actually much easier to use what I just showed you, use a set of digital calipers, because I get much better measurements and I can use it for more different things. Now, I also said when I'm done, my plan is to use bed liner. So you can get bed liner, and in this case, this is Herculiner. It had fairly good reviews online, but you can get it either as a spray can or you can get it as a paint on. My intention here is to spray this on, and because it has a rough texture finish, it doesn't have to have an automotive or a nice aircraft finish. It can be a little bit rougher. And because of that, I'm just gonna use some self-etching primer to do it. So once I've got all the floor laid out, I'm gonna have a little review on painting for something like this. But what I'm planning on doing is cleaning this, scuffing it up, using the self-etching primer, and then spraying on the bed liner. The bed liner has a lot of texture to it already, so that texture will hide any imperfections. So it doesn't have to be as smooth as a finish as you would need maybe for your exterior painting and things that you're going to want to look really nice, because it's going to have almost a spackle coat, which builders learned a long time ago that if you put texture on a wall or texture on a ceiling, it hides a lot of the imperfections in the plaster and drywall work. And the same sort of thing here is that texture is not only going to provide grip, it's not only going to provide some rubberization inside the cockpit, but it's also going to hide any imperfections on these panels. So that's how I decided to do that. Now, the process is really simple. What I did in this case is I first went through and using one of these U-shaped speed nuts from Hillman, I went through and I measured out each tab, and I centered this up on each tab using one of these. And I used the calipers to do that. And once I had it in position, I actually ran the drill bit through this to make the hole in each of the metal tabs that are here. And the reason is that it allowed me a centering mechanism to do it. I also used a center punch to kind of mark the start of the drill's position. And one of the little tricks that I learned in the class when I was learning to do sheet metal is twisting the bit a little bit inside the drill to get that starting position a little bit more started, I guess is the term that I'll use, so that it doesn't skip. Last thing you want is your drill bits, skipping and skidding across the surface and making a mess of things. So I use these to actually hold the drill bit in place as I drilled through and not move around. So I marked it, center punched it, spun the bit a little bit by hand, and then I drilled through, and that seemed to work very well. And everything came out in a nice position. And these are pretty centered, not perfectly, but pretty centered on each of these tabs, and it worked great. So that's what I would do. Is these are cheap. You can buy these like for $6. You get a box of 20. So I used up 2 of these during this process. I probably could have gone a little bit farther and did a different speed nut for each one, but I reused it. And then once it had expanded too much in order to hold in position anymore, I got another one, and then for six spots, it took 2. So I figure as I go back on the aircraft, I'm probably gonna use maybe another 8 to 10 of these as guides, which will go in the trash. And then when I go to assemble this I put a good one, a new one on, and I put it through. The other thing I did is once I drilled the holes for everything, then I went on and I measured and I clamped the floor into position. And once it was clamped into position, then I went through one hole at a time, drilled through it, deburred it with a deburring tool, which if you don't have a deburring tool, highly recommend that you buy one. They, again, are fairly inexpensive. This is a deburring tool, pretty standard. There's all kinds of other ones you can get that are more fancy and more expensive. If you go to the sheet metal class under EAA, again, a little plug for them, they'll talk through the different ones of these. But this one, again, got online, came with replacement deburring blades, which is nice. It's red, so I can see it if it falls on the floor. But I deburred every hole, including the tab holes that I drilled, and when I drilled up through the aluminum and cleaned them all up. And then once I took the plastic film off it, I did it again because that plastic film was going to prevent some of the burrs from coming out. The other thing I used a lot on this was the wet dry vac. And what I used the wet dry vac for was instead of trying to get every bit metal, I've actually ran the wet dry vac and vacuumed up all the metal shavings because I don't want those floating around in my aircraft either. And then I again used a little bit of alcohol on a rag and I cleaned up all the areas and all the bore holes that I drilled through. Now I will, when I take this off to primer it, I'm going to take a little bit of primer on to prime those little holes that I made just to keep any corrosion from building up inside the holes. Nothing worse than hitting corrosion on an aircraft, so we're going to avoid that as well. So I'll throw in a few pictures of the process as I went through this, but this is a fairly easy thing to do. It took me to do this first panel, setting everything up and all that. It took me, just under an hour to do. I know that's a long time, but the first one I wanted to make sure that it was right. What I found is pretty much everything is I do it once, and then the other ones take about half that time. So I'm figuring probably 30 minutes a panel, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the complexity of it. Going all the way back, fairly easy process. I think that putting the gasolator in and the fuel select valve, that's probably going to take a little bit more time because I have to figure that out and figure out how that goes in. But it should be a very similar process. And then I'll have all the flooring in, and I'll be ready to start doing some of the stringers that need to go up on top of the aircraft and stringers underneath the aircraft for the next step. So that's where we're at today. So that's my short talk on flooring, and that's what I've done with the flooring. I'll include a few zoomed in pictures and mix those in for you, show you how it all came out. And again, don't worry too much about, there's a little bit of dimpling and things on this floor. That's all going to be hidden once I put on the rubberized flooring, because that's going to give it a little thickness. So that's not as important on this as actually just getting it squared and aligned. And probably this is the prettiest it's going to look, right? This looks all shiny and clean and new right now. But once I put the floor liner on there, it's going to look black, which is going to be nice. I'm going to like the black panel. We're going to use a lot of black interior pieces in here. I think at this point we're planning on keeping the paint the same color that it came in and not doing too much there, but on the bare aluminum and on some of the controls like the trim wheel up here, we are going to select a color for those. But we're primarily on the cockpit, we're going to go black because I like the look of a black cockpit. It's very military to me, which I'm familiar with. So I'm going to do a lot of that, and that's how we'll kind of be coloring the cockpit. So that's it for today. Again, a nice short video of what we're doing here. Again, we're working on the floor. We'll probably work some more on that as time permits. Again, life having what it is, or being what it is, it'll be difficult to do a lot this weekend because of being busy. But we'll keep working on the floor as we get a break, and we'll get all that in. And then once all that's done and the weather warms up a little bit more, and I can do some of this spray activity outside, we'll talk about the portable spray booth that I purchased for the smaller pieces, and we'll do a review on that, and we'll see how all this turns out. And if it turns out great. If it turns out badly, I guess I'll be calling Bearhawk and ordering some new floor. Hopefully not that. So that's what's going on here today. And so from River Bear, have a great day and see you again soon.